Well, it's fascinating to me when I think back because in 1986 I walked into the offices of the Sun, and the then editor said to me, "You are doing the Royals." And from that moment on, my career reporting on the royal family started. My very first assignment was to cover the wedding of Prince Andrew in 1986 to Sarah Ferguson. I was firstly sent to the Azores, where we thought they were going to have their honeymoon on board the Royal Yacht Britannia. And then I came back and actually did cover the wedding. And fast forward, here we are nearly 40 years later, and he's 65, 65. And it's quite incredible the way time has flown. But of course, the big contrast is between when I started and where we are now. When I started, it was only 4 years after Prince Andrew had returned from the Falklands, where he'd been a helicopter pilot during that war down in the South Atlantic. And he very much came back a hero in the eyes of the public. He was very, very popular. And then when he got married in 1986, Fergie, as she was known to everyone, Sarah Ferguson, was seen as a breath of fresh air, really. And she was seen as a great addition to the royal family. She wasn't a classic beauty like Princess Diana was, Prince Charles's then husband, then Prince Charles's then wife, who's then called Prince Charles, not King Charles. But she was different. She had a great sense of humour. You could see that they had a fantastic rapport. We called them Andy and Fergie in those days. And for a couple of years, it seemed to go well, and the public took to her, and it was a great combination. But sadly, it went wrong quite quickly, and they separated after only 6 years, after they'd had two children, Beatrice and Eugenie, and then they divorced after 10 years when he got involved with Jeffrey Epstein and he gave that infamous Newsnight interview. He came across as not really having much empathy with the victims. And I think, unfortunately, some of that arrogance has always been with him, and he's probably been surrounded by people who've been fawning to him. And I think that's part of the problem. Well, in the last month or so, we've had all these reports that he's managing to find some ways of making money with some various sort of deals that he's trying to pull off. Now, whether that happens or not, it's not going to restore whether he gets the money which enables him to stay at Royal Lodge or to carry on his lifestyle. I think we can put that on one side. I think the most important thing is for him to have any kind of rehabilitation in the eyes of the public. He's really got to sort of look at himself in the mirror. He's got to accept the fact that his life as a working royal is finished. There's no chance for a comeback. I think over the last couple of years, he's probably thought that if he leaves it long enough, he might be able to make some sort of comeback. I think that's just a non-starter. If I were him, I would sort of, perhaps give another interview or give some sort of short telecast and put out there a real apology to people for his behaviour. And certainly he didn't really show a great deal of empathy, as I say in the Newsnight interview. If he actually showed that he understood, if he really got it, where he went wrong, I think that would help. But as for what he's going to do in the future, I don't think it's, as I say, he can't be a working royal. So I think he needs to sort of face up to that. I mean, he could clear off to Bahrain or something and live a new life in the Middle East. But if he wants to stay in this country and he wants to be rehabilitated, I think he should really sort of start off with an apology and then possibly try and find a charity or some sort of one particular cause that he could really work away at. A bit like John Profumo did in the 60s after the Profumo affair, and sort of restore his reputation. I think that's the only way forward for him. I mean, there is an alternative. He could sort of just, pack up and give up with trying to become a royal again and just become a sort of celebrity in his own right and maybe, go in the jungle. I mean, if a whole new generation of people, perhaps younger people, would see him in a different light if they saw him in the jungle and he displayed a good sense of humour, a bit like Nigel Farage did in the jungle. People might warm to him, but that would really be a nuclear option. I don't think the king would be terribly happy about him doing that. But on the other hand, he's only 65. He's perfectly healthy. What's he going to do for the rest of his life? So it's a difficult one, but I think we've come to the point where he needs to sort of, as I say, take a look in the mirror, maybe draw a line under it in some way, and make a fresh start in some way. Well, I think if Andrew moved out of Royal Lodge, if he did what the king wants him to do, and that is to downsize and move into Frogmore Cottage or a smaller property that's on the Crown Estates, I think that would be an important first step because at the moment there's a sort of impasse and he's not really doing what the king wants him to do. And I think that would be a gesture of goodwill if he showed that he was prepared to move out of Royal Lodge, which after all is a very, very big property. And there's only him and his ex-wife living in it now because obviously their daughters, Bea and Eugenie, have left and have got families of their own. So he just doesn't need this enormous property. So that would be a first step. And I think if he did that, I think the king would appreciate it because that would show that he was, he turned over a new leaf. And that would be a good starting point. And then things could possibly go on after that. As I say, I don't see any prospect of him returning as a working royal, doing any royal duties. Maybe he could get back in some sort of, in some sort of kilter with the military. Obviously, being an ex-serviceman himself, if he could get back in with some sort of military patronage, I think that would be, very good for him. But again, I don't see that happening in the near future. But as I say, if he made these small steps, then I think slowly he could start to see some sort of rehabilitation. But he's still going to be accepted as a brother and as a member of the royal family at Christmas and summer holidays. He was up at Balmoral last year. He didn't go to Sandringham for Christmas, of course, but that's in the end, I think, was his choice and the choice of, probably his ex-wife, helped him to make that decision. But I think that's probably a one-off. I think he'll be back at Sandringham next Christmas, and I think he'll be back up at Balmoral with the family. So, the king's not going to cut him out of family events. He's still a much-loved member of the family. But in terms of his, reputation and his role as a working royal, he is finished, and Prince William is the Prince of Wales is very, very much against him having any kind of comeback, and I think he's one of the driving forces behind this, and so it's very, very difficult for Andrew. He's in a position where not only the king but also the future king just don't see a role for him. So it's got to be slow steps, but I think moving out of Royal Lodge would be a good first one. I think we pretty much know how he spends his days at the moment and has done for the last 2 or 3 years. He has the occasional game of golf with friends. He goes out riding. Of course, it's nice that he and his ex-wife now have four grandchildren. So obviously that takes up a fair bit of his time, and I'm sure he dotes on them, and that's probably taken his mind off it. The recent arrival of Princess Beatrice's second child has obviously given them both a boost, and I'm sure that he spends a lot of time with the grandkids, and he's very proud of them. So he has got things in his life, but you do get the impression that he's rattling around. And as I say, there's reports recently that he's trying to find ways of making money and maintain his lifestyle. A fairly sort of sad guy, but I think that would be a very tragic end for him. And so if he can find something positive to get his teeth into, that would be good for all concerned. But it's a very difficult balancing act, and it's a very it's a very fine line. So I'm not quite sure what's going to happen. My advice to him would be to try and take these steps, move out of Royal Lodge, find some sort of cause he can get involved in. He can find a charity to take him on, and then take it from there. And then who knows? In 6, 7, 8 years' time, the world could be a very different place, and there might be a way back for him. But certainly at the moment, I just don't see it.